This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not provide medical or legal advice. Please consult with a qualified professional before making any decisions regarding your health or legal situation.
On the subject of marijuana in particular. That is the purpose of this meeting, ladies and gentlemen, to lay the foundation for a nationwide campaign by you to demand by law such compulsory education.
High in the Ozark Mountains, it's the Greene County Podcast with Mike and Mason.
All right, today you're in for a treat. This is going to be a pretty good episode, I have a feeling.
I think so. It's going to be educational.
I want to break it up into 3 parts, okay?
Okay.
Flame, vape, and then edible, okay? Those 3 parts.
Okay, well, let's say what we're doing first.
Let's spill the candy in the lobby just now, Mason. Of course, today's episode is going to be about stoner engineering.
Oh, heck
and all
yeah,
the
dude.
ways that we as users have figured out ways to consume marijuana. So which one do you want to start with first? That's why I brought it up. I'm going to let you choose.
Ooh, I mean, let's just do, I want to end on flame because I think that's the best one.
Oh, you want to do the best? Okay, so you want to start with edibles?
Save the best for last. Yeah, let's edibles.
Edibles?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, there are many ways to skin a cat, as we have definitely discussed on this podcast before. And when it comes to edibles, the first thing that you probably think of is brownies. Obviously, brownies was the thing that before was medically legal across the country. Everybody
was doing it.
Trying to do it. I will share the story that when I was in high school, before a drumline competition, a group of us tried to make brownies and completely botched it. But we not only did we bought, well, because we didn't really understand what you were supposed to do after the decarb process. So a lot of those brownies had a lot of flour inside.
Oh, no. You made shadow style?
Yeah, essentially.
Oh, that's
it was
not good.
funny. Well, it was 2 things. One, everyone was kind of like, "Oh, what's this?" And I was like, "Just think of them as nuts, man. It's fine." You know,
It's like Nestle Crunch.
well, at the end of it, everyone else was like, "I don't want those," and so me and a couple guys just pretty much ate them all ourselves. By the time I got back to town, like the girl I was seeing at the time, I remember seeing her like that night, and she's like, "Hey, you want to go blah, blah, blah?" I was like, "No, I think I'm done. I think I'm out. I don't want to do it anymore." She's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, I just have literally, I think I've greened out. And that was really, I think, my first green out experience. Where
Oh, wow.
I was like, I don't want this or like this. It was probably because I ingested in somewhere between 500 and 1,000 milligrams of THC over the course.
Like straight up
24
flour mixed with chocolate brownie mix. That sounds so gross.
So yeah, that's my story. But again, and on that, I've gotten wiser as I've gotten older. There's these things, they're called ardents, essentially. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Is that one of those machines, those infusing machines?
So a coworker had one, and then a buddy of mine had one, and so I got one a couple years ago. And essentially, you kind of think of it as like a crock pot. Essentially, you throw in your flour, and then you set it to a decarb process. And the cool thing about it is it makes sure that all your flour throughout is at that temperature, so you don't have to worry about wasting any. You don't have to worry about burning any. So that's a big deal. Then once it's done, if you want to go the like coconut oil route, which is what I do, MCT oil, just dump it right in there. Then you set it to infuse, and then it infuses into the oil through a process. Or if you want to throw butter, you can throw sticks of butter in there, do the same thing. You just separate it, and then of course you strain the flour out after.
Please strain the flour. Strain the flour.
And again, we're not paid by these guys to I'm not endorsing them other than the fact that I use it. And
We would love a free machine. I don't have one yet.
So one, if you can get them one,
hey, Arden,
me back.
shout out.
Give me some of those really awesome accessories that you got. But really, that is the way that I personally do my edible process.
My edible game has evolved over time, right? I used to do the super old school. I just boil weed and oil or butter in one pan, right?
So you
decarb.
You don't.
Okay. So the first time, actually, fun fact: the first time I made edibles, I didn't decarb. I just boiled for like an hour. I don't think they were very strong. I learned from that mistake, though. You got to decarb first in the oven, and then I throw it into the boiling pot. Once that was done, I would take that entire pot, I'd throw it in the fridge so that it would congeal and solidify on top. All the flour would sink to the bottom, and boom, you've got your butter. Now, though, I really up my game. It's not like super technical like yours, but I use a Instapot, right?
Mm-hmm.
I take little mason jars, I decarb, and I make the butter or oil all in the same thing. So giant Instapot, I put the mason jars in there with some bud, let that cook for like 40 minutes or so. Then I will take that out, unscrew it, throw in my butter or oil or whatever, screw it back on, throw it back in there for a couple hours, and it's the best ever. Also, doesn't stink because everything is like double bagged, so to speak.
Yeah.
It only stinks when you pop it open to throw in the butter.
So again, what he just described is a way that you can do it with all the stuff you have in your house.
Oh yeah,
All
it's so much easier.
Like you literally can go and get what flour, wherever you get your flour at, and then go through that whole process. And on top of that, you will be able to do what you need to do without having to spend a few $100s on a system like I have. Again, mine is extremely convenient. And
yeah, but yours costs money.
Yeah.
I can literally get everything I need to make mine for like $5 at Red Rex.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, that's kind of how we do the edibles. When we come back, we're going to go down the vape road and talk about how we get our dabs. And Mason actually has made carts in the past. So
oh yeah,
we're going to talk about that too. As Mr. Scientist himself. We'll be back, Green County Podcast. We are back, Green County Podcast. We're here to talk about vaping, dabbing, and our stoner engineering. So
it gets a little bit more technical with this stuff.
Before we get into the vape stuff, we'll just start with straight up dabs. There are a lot of different ways that you can actually extract dabs without having to get a press. I've seen guys do the parchment hair curler trick because you can press and get heat.
Yeah.
You're not going to get as much out of it as you would in a press, but it does work.
In a pinch.
In a pinch, if you need to.
I mean, just smoke the bud if you. But
I get what you're saying, but
the weed engineering,
and that's why this is stoner engineering. We're trying to figure out different ways to do it. I knew guys back in the day, in the black market days, that were making their own dabs using butane and that whole process.
Oh yeah, but they weren't cleaning it.
Well,
that's pulling out that butane. Yeah,
though.
that's when it's getting bad.
I am cautious to go down that road with the instructions on how to pull that off because it does involve volatile chemicals, and there have been people that have literally set their houses on fire trying to convert weed into dabs before. There were two dudes that were doing that in Oklahoma like a couple of years ago. I remember, and at first everyone was like, "Oh, they're making a meth lab." No, they were trying to convert.
Yeah,
dabs.
That's crazy.
But I mean, again, it's volatile chemicals. Now that's the butane, right? Wait,
you need like a vacuum chamber to like legitimately get all that stuff out.
Essentially, that's what you need to do. But there are ways that you can do it without it.
Lab equipment.
You can do CO2, which kind of freezes it and blasts it. It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same way they do the bubble hash.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ways. Bubble hash. If you didn't know, you've got a bunch of different bags with screen filters that are smaller and smaller and smaller. You take it and you give it an ice bath because the coldness makes the
THC brittle.
Yeah,
falls right off,
pops off, and then you just sift it all out and then scrape it off and dry it out.
A little labor intensive, but you do get a ton of bubble hash off of it.
It is the cleanest. I gotta say,
you cannot dab that stuff. Don't even try to dab it because there's organic material in it. So that's the problem with going down that road. You're still going to have to smoke it.
But have you ever pressed some of that? That is
and
purest.
And you can use those
purest like shatter.
Vapes. You know, those hydro vapes, the metal ones.
Vapes.
They look like little one hitters, and they're like dug out things, and they have a little tip on the edge, and you pack it and you click it with the metal tip, and then when it's ready, it hits this temperature, it'll pop it, and you'll hear a click. And technically, that's a way. They call it manual vaping, essentially, or analog vaping, because there's no electricity involved. Yeah. You still have to have a torch.
So it's basically convection.
But you could do that with your bubble hash, is what I'm getting at.
Okay.
So if you are like, you're like, I still want to vape it, and this is an easier way. You can't. There are ways to do it, but as far as dabbing, it does take chemicals and or a very expensive press if you don't have one. Treehouse has got one. You can go in there and do it. That's kind of the way the dabs thing, and that's probably why the way I still go to dispensaries for concentrates like that, because it's just so labor heavy. But I did want to talk about dab rigs a little bit, and when we get to the fire,
dude is addicted to dabs, like straight up. He's like, hey man, they got some resin, rosin, live crystals going on right now.
Very, very dab problem. So when we get to the fire part of this episode, we'll talk about, the 2-liter bottle situation, the Apple situation and stuff like that. There really isn't a way as far as I know, to safely use concentrates, and I'm talking about shatter.
I've got your answer right here. I've done it before.
Okay. Well, I'm just saying personally.
You ready?
I did it. I always have used a nail.
Knife dabs. You ever done a knife dab?
You just put it on a knife.
You just heat up a knife, dab it on there
with a straw.
With a straw or whatever you got.
You're wasting so much when you do that.
This isn't about making the most quality best. This is about I have literally, oh no, my dab rig broke. I'm on vacation. What do? You get a piece of metal and then you heat it up. You can heat it up on the oven.
Say, hey, I got some dabs. I can't. My rig's broke.
Yeah.
I'll be like, come on over, because you know what? I'm going to get some.
Whether it's safe or not, whether you get the most quality smoke or not, that's not the answer here. The dab knife, you heat it up on your oven, right? Pull it off. Make sure you're wearing gloves because it gets hot.
It's kind of like the seahorse situation a little bit.
Oh yeah, seahorses are awesome too. If you don't,
if essentially as a glass or metal straws, you heat the end and you stick them right in your dab.
Yeah, it's like a nectar straw.
Nectar straw. But I still, even with those, and those are made, I still feel like you're wasting so much. And in that term, that gets us to like the whole argument between how people with dabs, they go either torch or E. Oh, and I, for the longest time, was a big proponent of the torch dabs.
E-nails, though, now, it's so much cleaner. You know what I'm saying? It's just cleaner.
I can't even describe to you how, so my partner, she's still on the torch. She doesn't like the E thing. She doesn't feel like, she likes the one and done. Mm-hmm. With an E-nail, that coil is keeping your nail consistent temperature, so you're not burning off that dab concentrate so quickly like when you do with the torch. Like you can torch it, you can time it, you can see what your temperature is based on how long you do it, how you hit it.
You get some char.
Yeah, but you're always going to get charred. It's not always going to be consistent, but with
harder to clean.
Eventually you're going to have to clean your E-nail too, but it doesn't char as easily, and it maintains so much easier. And I also feel like I'm not wasting any.
Oh yeah,
I usually just get to the point where I'm done, and I could still probably keep hitting it if I wanted to, but at the end of that, you're kind of at the end of it. So it's like, I don't know. I'm really on the east side of things in that regard. I think it's just it sucks because you have to have the box, you got all these cables, kind of have to have a set place for it all. Which is inconvenient, obviously, but there are ways around it. They've got the wands and stuff like that. But
yeah, they got some cool stuff.
And I used to run a Pico D4 setup, which is like a Pico mod box with a titanium little cup on top of it.
Oh yeah.
Cup, and so you could do mobile dabs that way. But the problem with that is, where do you keep your dabs at?
Yeah,
and then you got to clean it after every time. You're going to keep that thing with
pulling a kit everywhere. Yeah,
and you got. They really haven't figured out a good way to portable dab, with the exception of the vape. And so if you're going to be portable, personally, I think if you're going to be somewhere where it's kind of got to keep it on the DL or you're traveling or something, vape's the way to go.
It is.
How in the hell did you make those on your own?
Vape carts are, honestly, I would rather buy them than make them, because they're they're a little too cumbersome. They're a little messy, and when I make them, there's a lot of product waste. So you take your concentrate. You always got to start with concentrate. The cleaner, the better. You can make it with your curling iron press or whatever if you need to, and then you mix it up with. They either have some special liquid you can buy to liquidize your wax, or I use terpenes. Just different flavors that they're naturally extracted from botanical stuff. It'll liquefy it, and then you just pour it into a cart with one of those little needle syringe things. But like I said, it is super messy, super sticky. It's hard to get the right consistency, so you're testing it constantly. You'll have some that'll just dribble liquid through it. Not good. It took me a while to perfect it.
And we're talking about like the mixture of what your terpenes you're adding back in, your base, all that stuff. It's very difficult.
And it's like millimeters of stuff. Yeah. And if you get just a little bit off, it messes it up. So I would say buy your own. But I would love to talk about vaporizers, which a lot of people don't discuss anymore. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
like vaping dry bud.
Yeah.
Volcanoes.
Yeah.
My buddy had a volcano.
Yeah, I had a buddy.
And, okay, so check this out, right? The bag setup, we went and got oven turkey bags, right? Yeah. It was a whole roll of it. So we could make bags as big as we wanted. We literally made one that was roughly 6 feet long, and it's, the size of a turkey around. So we'd fill that bad boy up and just toss it across the room for like an hour, hitting off that bad boy. I would strongly suggest making your own bags if you've got a vape setup like that, because it is super easy to do and super fun. You literally have enough for an entire party. Cool.
The vape and dry bud thing, I definitely see the pros of it. Personally, I need the whole plant. You know what I mean? I'm a whole plant kind of guy, and I know I see the other side of the argument big time, but
yeah,
I always feel like I'm not getting enough if I'm not getting the whole plant.
See, I used to vape all the time. I know another thing that people have an issue with is like towards the end, it starts getting that popcorny flavor. Like, I get that, but don't smoke it that long.
Yeah.
Reload your stuff.
Personally, feel like you're losing a little bit. Either way, we're going to come back and talk about our stoner engineering for fire next Green County Podcast. We're back one more time to discuss our stoner engineering. Now we're to the best part.
This is my favorite part.
Fire.
I used to call myself a weed technician, and I spelled technician with THC because I'd always loved just making weed Guyver. Yeah, MacGyver of weed. I would just make everything. You name it, I've probably made it. Apple pipe,
yeah, done that.
Gravity bong,
done that. 2 liter pipe. You can use basically it's the can setup essentially. But you cut a hole on the side, foil on the top. You remember? Did you ever hear that that urban myth about how like if you smoke something out of foil, you would die like 20?
Oh yeah, it causes cancer. It causes cancer, which I think it probably does. Honestly,
dude, I'm gonna tell you right now. You do something on an often enough basis, it's gonna cause you cancer. That's just the way it works. It doesn't matter what it is. But yeah, done that.
The craziest thing. So like, I kind of got kicked out of college once. There were a whole bunch of things, but part of it was flooding a 4th floor apartment in Sun Villa Apartments all the way down to the basement. They ended up catching all the things we were doing in the room and had to go to college court.
Yeah.
This is like a real thing.
Yeah.
And I got asked the silliest question because our place was a mess. There was a little bit of weed here and there, something like that. You know, mostly it was alcohol. My roommates were terrible people. That's beside the point. So I got asked in court whether or not I knew what bong residue looked like. And I was like, yeah, I think it's brown. And then they asked me, can you make a bong out of a sink? And we never did that, but it got me thinking.
You could.
So now I made one. I made a bong in a sink after I was kicked out of college. And it worked. It was amazing. The setup, I'm not going to tell you because it's way too much and it's really cool. But just imagine.
Yeah, it's the DIY.
Yeah, DIY. Yeah.
DIY. Why?
But just imagine a bunch of tubing, 2 2-liter bottles. I also created one that was like, you know, those air bladder style where you like lift it up and it pulls in. Basically that. But you put the bladder over the top of the sink.
And you
so it's literally the whole sink is your bong. Wow. It's crazy.
Craziest thing I made, I think, is probably the Army flashlight. I took an Army flashlight and converted, you know, the plastic ones. Have you ever seen those that are like, yeah, just converted it into one.
That's too good.
Yeah, and that was in high school, and we were going to a show, and I was like, hey, I know this will work. And it was, well, I mean.
Who needs a flashlight when you got a bong light?
Prototype flame to hard plastic. Talking worried about aluminum foil. Not the best thing to do in the world. But at the end of the day, like we always say, there are a million ways to skin a cat. If you have any stoner engineering ideas of your own that we may not have covered in today's episode, hit us up, greencountypodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, we'll also check it out. We've got tons of recipes, some great stories, local deals or events when they're happening. We'd like to post about that. Also hit us up on the social medias.
And keep on smoking, use responsibly. And as always, I'm Mike, this is Mason. And thanks for spending some time with us on your Green County Podcast.
So that our children are obliged to learn the truth, because it is only through knowledge that we can safely protect them.
This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only and does not provide medical or legal advice.